9 o'clock, so we'll go ahead and call this school board advertised workshop into session at this time. And folks, just like in the past, we'll go through every item on the agenda. If you have comments or questions, please just try to stop me. I'll try to pause, but sometimes it's not long enough. But in any case, of course, the first item is to open the meeting. Second item is to approve the agenda. And I do have some changes, or at least one change. It reads consent agenda. The order of consent agenda items were adjusted at the request of the superintendent. Okay. So then moving on to section 3, recognitions. Recognition of Fort Walton Beach High School boys doubles tennis team FHSAA Class 3A champions presented by the superintendent. Visitors, we have Ms. Cindy Holmes, Resource Development Director, and Rick Owen, President, CEO of United Way of Okaloosa Walton Counties, in appreciation of contributions to the United Way. 4.2, we have Children in Crisis, Change for Children campaign by Mrs. Ann Johnson and Mrs. Jenny Hamilton, Mary Jane Ross, and Ken Hare, CEO, President of Children in Crisis. Then moving on to some business items, administrative and personnel appointments. 5.1, appointment of the principal at Plew Elementary School recommended by the superintendent for approval. 5.2, appointment of principal Richburg School recommended by the superintendent for approval. 5.3, appointment of principal Lewis School recommended by the superintendent for approval. 5.4, appointment of Assistant Principal 1, Okaloosa Technical College, recommended by the superintendent for approval. And 5.5, appointment of Assistant Principal 2, Longwood Elementary School, recommended by the superintendent for approval. Section 6 is our routine public comment. Section 7, committee and staff reports. 7.1, in-county travel paid for the period of April 25th through May the 8th, 2019, presented by Mrs. Rita Scallon, Chief Financial Officer. 7.2, out-of-county travel paid for the period of April 25th through May the 8th, 2019, presented by Mrs. Rita Scallon, Chief Financial Officer. Then moving on to consent agenda. 8.1, approval of the consent agenda. 8.2, approval of the minutes of workshop meeting of May 9th, 2019, minutes of the regular meeting of May 13, 2019, minutes of special workshop meeting of May 15, 2019. Moving on to section 8.3, this is the request to advertise a public hearing for the adoption of revised school board policy 04-28, emergency operations, school safety and security, presented by Mr. Danny Dean, Specialist, Safe Schools, and recommended by the superintendent. And Superintendent, I didn't mean to step on you, but
that's all right.
I remembered that this is a juncture that you'd like to make a comment. And sir, I'll turn it over to you at this time.
Yes, sir, I appreciate it. And I would like at this time just to make a few comments about a few of the agenda items that's going to come before you. And I think, as you know, over the course of the last 4 months or so, I've met with a lot of parents, a lot of community members, and principals and teachers as well. And there's several items on the agenda this morning for board consideration that reflects a lot of those conversations and moves us in a new direction as we work towards making our schools safer while providing more support for our students with special needs. With your cooperation, we'll accomplish both while cutting district level spending by over $1 million. I'm bringing to you a request to proceed with phase 1 today of our school security upgrade project. I'd like to thank the board members. As you know, you've been instrumental in the safety of our schools, and I'd especially like to thank Mr. Destin, who's the board representative to the construction program. While not going into specific safety and security details at the school sites, I think that our schools will be safer as we go into next year as we implement this phase. Also, in the area of school safety, I'm asking you to consider a first-of-its-kind agreement with the Okaloosa County Sheriff's Office to permit us to have real-time access with our school cameras. We are working very closely with Sheriff Ashley, who, as you know, served on the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas Commission. His experience and insight in support of our safety initiatives is going to be immeasurable. If the unthinkable were to happen, I think these video cameras and them to have the ability to have access to it, I think would be something that we would all want and need. And finally, on the school safety front, I just want you to know that, as we get into the conversation on the Guardian program, I'm in full support of the implementation of the Guardian program and have full confidence that Sheriff Ashley will implement this in a way that makes our students even safer. It's unfortunate that in today's world that we're even having to have some of these discussions, and I think back, like we talked to our principals 5, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, some of this was probably unthinkable to even be having these conversations, but it is the day in which we live. But I'm very appreciative to everybody in terms of conversations, and of course to the sheriff, who's been a huge supporter of ours. We have the #1 SRO program in the state and probably the nation. But I think any measure that we can take for safety and leave no stone unturned, I think is important. And then lastly, as I mentioned, we are looking at a reduction at the district level of over $1 million to help support our ESE programs. And there will be more resource teachers, counselors, staffing specialists, and other positions. But I think it'll put us in an even stronger position to have an even better ESE program. So I just wanted to start with just leading into that. And with your permission, I'd love to have the sheriff come up at this time.
No problem. Welcome, Sheriff Ashley. Would you come forward, sir? Appreciate you taking the time out of your schedule to be here again. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, members, superintendent, it's always an honor to be before you, and especially since we all work towards the same goal, and that's to keep our students and staff safe, and especially in today's times. And my goal here this morning is not to scare you or scare the public, but the MOU in regards to live feed video from your schools to our Emergency Operations Center is one of a three-pronged approach on making our schools safer. We all know the Marjorie Stoneman Public Safety Commission recommended a lot of things to our legislators, which were passed. The Fortify Florida app, the commission, the Office of Safe Schools, the safe school officers, SROs in every school. The list goes on and on. But I'll give you some statistics that will let you be more informed on why I believe that not only do we need the live feed video and the Guardian program to help augment what we already have. We have over 1,600 Baker Acts in our county every year. That's a lot of people that have some mental breakdown during the course of a year. We've had 1,350 domestic violent incidents in 2018, 350 sexual predators and offenders that our SROs keep track of, 250 gang members as identified in statute and their associates. And these are just in Okaloosa County. Violent crime this past year rose 11.8%. In the last 5 years, we've taken 10 firearms off students and 3 in the last 45 days. So to say that we want to, there's no guarantee for safety in this world, and we all know that. But we want to make it just as difficult as possible to prevent and mitigate, if we can't prevent, mitigate great loss of life. So with that, our attorney, your attorney has, Mr. McGinnis has certainly to make sure that our live feed video is FERPA compliant and that it's not a monitoring system per se. It's more that we can pull up any individual school of your schools within the district. Should we have a lockdown? Should we have an armed robbery in the area? Should we have any incident within an area of a school? We can pull it up and make sure that we can put resources on site to where it's needed most. And so we certainly hope you'll approve that. And certainly I can speak now to the Guardian program if it's an appropriate time to do that.
Yes, sir.
You all were kind enough to come with me to when we hosted Sheriff Giltari at Northwest Florida State College Kelly Arts Center. So you all saw what I saw sitting on the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas Public Safety Commission. And when I speak to groups, even your principals, the first thing I ask them is, what address are you at? Where's north? Where's south? Where's east? Where's west? How do you direct resources into you? And God forbid somebody comes in behind me and starts shooting in this facility, what do you do? And I can't tell you how many people don't know the answer to that. And we have to be more diligent, and we have been. And you said it, Mr. Superintendent, that we have the best SRO program in the year, and he didn't realize this. And I'm trying to keep this secret because I haven't told my own SROs yet. I'm meeting with them at 4 p.m., but we just, again, made SRO Unit of the Year for Florida.
Wow.
So they were just
Congratulations.
recognized for that. I recommend, though, that if you approve the Guardian program, that you not identify who your guardians are. Because we want to create, this is an augmentation to the school resource officer program. And when you augment that, you want to create an environment where a would-be attacker does not know where the risks are. And so if you identify and who they are and where they're stationed, then you defeat the purpose of the Guardian program as an augmentation to your school resource officers. Some of the other things that we've done, though, is through the commission and through legislators, mandatory SROs at every school, safe school officer in every school district, trained threat risk assessment teams at every school, mandatory active assailant and lockdown drills as often as others, like fire alarms, mandatory abuse, assessor, and threat reporting, which has been all updated, the fencing and single point of entry and all those things. So as Mr. Thornton he's on top of that. Alice and Stop the Bleed training, locking classroom doors, policies regarding monitoring entrance and exit gates and bus ramps, that's all underway. Mandatory duty to report threats from homicidal or suicidal patients. That's doctors used to not, in Florida, did not have a duty to warn. They had the ability to, but they didn't have a duty to. Now they have a duty to report homicidal or suicidal patients to law enforcement. I say all this, again, not to scare you, but the Guardian program is very specific, laid out in statute 3015. In it, 132 hours of training are required. This is a volunteer program. We've met in executive session to talk about some of the details and how policies would govern that, everything from the standardization of the weapon carry to the holsters and weapon retention, target acquisition, and everything from a stipend. Stipend paid for by the state, the training paid to the sheriff's office by the state, so it doesn't come out of local tax dollars. If the school board approves this program, not only do you have to evaluate your employee and recommend them to us, then we have to do the psychological evaluation, then we have to do the background investigation, and they have to pass the 132 hours worth of training successfully. And so it's a dual evaluation process. And so whether we have 10 or 100, we don't know. We have no idea at this point. We just know that we have the funding to train them, we have the ability to train them if you so approve. And it would certainly be my recommendation that you do so. And I'll be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Well, Sheriff, the board members may have questions, so
I just
colleagues, Mr. Bryant.
I just have a comment. I just want to say thank you to Sheriff Ashley. I know in my journeys around the state, talking to other school board members, we do not have the luxury of having a sheriff who makes things easy for us because you're active and you're wanting to do the right things. So just from my perspective, I just want to say thank you for doing what you do and putting kids first, putting safety first. It definitely makes our job a lot easier.
And it's always good to hear that. It's my honor to do it. I've told our county commission and I've told this board first, if they only fund me for 50 officers, those 50 officers will be in schools, and then the adults outside world can deal with their own problems. It's that important to me that if we can't protect our children, nothing else really matters.
Well, I think it was evident after the Marjorie Stoneman, deal that you were here like the next board meeting sharing with us what your plans were. So
we were so far ahead of the rest of the state because we acted after the Sandy Hook event that it really put us on good footing. A lot left to do, though.
And Sheriff, how many counties did you say have adopted the Guardian program?
There's currently 43 counties that are current Guardian or going to the Guardian program in this coming year. And 18 of those do not identify their guardians and they do not wear uniforms.
And then on the live feed, that would just connect to the security cameras we already have in the schools, right? It's just that it's going to go to your situation?
Yes, it will go from this facility to a fiber, county fiber, which we're paying for that. I think it's $50,000 that the sheriff's office will pay to hook into for you to hook into our fiber, send your camera live feed to our emergency operations center. You know, you've got 40 schools, or 38 or ever how many it is, we're not going to have time, we don't have the personnel to monitor every school.
No.
But should an incident happen around a school, we can pull that school cameras up and see what is happening. Is there a fire on the, in the cafeteria? Is there a chemical spill? Is there a fight? Is there somebody that's armed? Did a robbery just happen nearby? So that we can put resources on where the problem is. So that's what the purpose of it is. We would have to initially do some training with our dispatchers on how to pull those cameras up and manipulate them should we have an incident at that school. And but the superintendent has assured us that you have an auditing mechanism that will allow you to know who opens a camera and who views a camera and how long they view it. So Mr. McGinnis has certainly, and our attorney have certainly gone over that in a MOU to govern that.
I really appreciated the information you gave us during the executive session.
Yes, ma'am.
And you've heard me say a billion times before, I would never be a principal in today's world without the SROs, and certainly appreciate the additional layers of support that you're providing to us. Thank you so much.
Yes, ma'am. It's, again, our honor to do it. And our folks, our school resource officers, and I brag on them a lot, but they deserve it. They are committed to the goal, and the goal is to make sure that our kids go home safe every
Thank
day.
you.
Mr. Destin, I think you.
I just appreciate the fact that you made the comment that the Guardian program is an augmentation of your already existing SRO. I mean, that's pretty important.
Yes, sir.
It's not like it's a program that's going to be operating off in the wilderness by itself. This is actually akin to the sheriff's posse and a number of other things that you have to augment your officers, and it makes me feel much more comfortable with the entire idea.
Yes, sir. In our SROs, and of course the principal, assistant principals, they'll know who those guardians are. But I think if you publicize that, then it defeats a great deal of the purpose of that program, to create that unknown environment for any would-be. I want any would-be attacker to believe everybody on campus is armed. I can show you what the signs they put in Texas outside their schools are: is everybody here is armed, and we will use our firearms to protect our students. There's always those that are opposed. You're always going to have that. But all I would say is the what if should not outdo the what has happened already.
Exactly. Anything else, colleagues? Superintendent?
Sheriff, one thing,
Yes,
we
ma'am.
went to to see that video at that workshop and everything, and maybe just for the public, because you've talked with us, one of the concerns that I was frightened about was the lack of communication there with the Parkland City Police and that and the Broward County. So we have several municipalities in our county, and could you just state briefly to that connection between your office and those, and when you have schools sitting in a city zone plus in the county?
Yes. Fortunately for us, with excepting a few schools, we have a very good response time to any of our schools. There are some municipalities, in the case of the Marjorie Stoneman incident, Coral Springs Police Department and Broward County Sheriff's Office, Coral Springs was actually closer to the school facility, but they weren't on the same communications frequency as the Broward County Sheriff's Office. Our surtax committee and our county commission and our citizens approved a surtax, half-penny sales tax this past year, and $20 million of that expected revenue was going towards a new communication system, which our communications acquisition committee has already been formed and in the process of doing that, which will allow us to communicate with all of our local municipalities and our state assistant FHP, Marine Patrol, and the like. We're currently on UHF VHS system rather than a digital system, so it will be a year, 2 years in the process of building this, or at least acquiring this and then building it out. But we already have the capability to patch with any agency within our community. So with exception, and I don't want to name the schools that are in outlying areas that
Yeah.
have difficulties with communications, and some that have communications problems within the schools just because of walls and things. But Mr. Thornton and I and others are certainly talking to speakers, with vendors about mass communication systems. that we hope to acquire before the school starts in the fall, at least for our high schools.
Great, thank you. That's good to know.
Anything else? All right, Sheriff, I think we probably have like the next 2 or 3 items here that cover some of your material. I know you're very, very busy, but
I set aside some time this morning
right.
because I thought I might have a few questions.
all right, Sheriff. Well, maybe if you could stay as we move through these items,
yes,
and
sir.
then we'll be done with that. And we're just again grateful that you would take time, and your staff. I see you have them here with you as well, out of your schedule to be here and to help us.
Yes, sir. Thank
All right,
you.
Sheriff.
Just
Yes,
call
sir.
me when you need.
All right, sir.
Thank you.
All right, colleagues, so, we talked about all these things, but we'll move through the next ones. If there's something that comes up, just let me know, and the sheriff said he'd come right back. All right, so we read 8.3. 8.4, memorandum of understanding between the sheriff of Okaloosa County, Florida, and the school board of Okaloosa County, Florida, to establish the terms and conditions under which the sheriff's office can access live feed security video as part of the district's overall safety and security plan, presented by Mr. Steve Horton, Assistant Superintendent of MIS, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. 8.5, Resolution Number 19-01, a resolution of the School Board of Okaloosa County, Florida regarding school safety, presented by Superintendent Marcus Chambers, and recommended for approval. All right, 8.6, payroll warrant register and accounts payable warrant register for April 2019 totaling $27,681,863.73, and bank transfers for April 2019 totaling $8,575,000, presented by Mrs. Rita Scallon, Chief Financial Officer, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. 8.7, authorization to appropriate federal impact aid funds and make a payment in the amount of $9,569 to charter schools and AMI Kids Emerald Coast, presented by Mrs. Rita Scallon, Chief Financial Officer, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval.
Dr. White, I have
Yes, sir.
a question. And Mr. Chambers, I just want to ask Ms. Scallon this question. AMI Kids, they're getting $9,569. I know this is federal dollars, but is it my understanding that they're not going to be open after this summer?
I can answer the federal impact aid question. Of course, if they have students that qualify, then they get that funding. Now, I would have to defer to Sheila about AMI Kids.
Okay.
I believe the 9,000 is the total amount. AMI Kids is getting $51.
Okay.
But you are correct, they are closing. They're a DJJ facility, and DJJ is no longer contracting with schools to provide that day school type
Okay.
situation.
And I appreciate that. I mean, $51, I mean, that's, better than $9,569.
Ms. Lightbourne, before you go.
Yes.
But I do want to say, so we've had and please explain, we've had a lot of conversations with AMI. We've tried to support AMI in any effort that we can make to be there for them, but go a little deeper if you would.
Okay, so AMI Kids was connected to DJJ. DJJ is no longer doing that. So we did meet with AMI a few months back and looked at how could we move forward with them. It was really too late for them to apply for a charter. They talked to us about giving them a school number, but then that would mean we were essentially opening a new school. So we actually have a meeting with their board tomorrow morning at 9:30 to explain all of those pieces. So, if they can either become a private school in a very quick amount of time, then we could do some contracting with them, or they'd have to go through the process to be a charter school so that we could then continue to work with them. But at this point, we have not come to the board and asked to open a new alternative school, so we would not be able to do that.
Thank you.
And so what's Plan B if they're not there to do the function that they've traditionally done for us?
So DJJ, it is my understanding that what DJJ intends to do is either students will be incarcerated or they will use community services to provide the services that those students need. But educationally, my understanding is if they're not incarcerated, they would be in our schools.
And then explain just really quickly the vast majority of the students, how they get to AMI.
Well, the vast majority are court-ordered to go there. It's kind of like a day incarceration program, but they get their education while they're there, and then they're at home at night. So that's how it currently works, but with DJJ pulling that contract, and that's statewide. It's not just here with our AMI kids. It's statewide with any of those types of schools. So it's not just AMI kids. That will no longer occur.
And so should you have additional information for us after the meeting tomorrow, I would assume that you'd be bringing that back to us, maybe even Monday.
Sure, absolutely.
Anything else, colleagues? Superintendent?
No, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Blackmore.
You're welcome.
All right, so moving on to 8.8, Budget Amendment Number 8, Fiscal Year 2018-2019, presented by Mrs. Rita Scallon, Chief Financial Officer, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. 8.9, Monthly Financial Statement for April 2019, presented by Mrs. Rita Scallon, Chief Financial Officer, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. 8.10, Invoices to be approved for payment, presented by Mrs. Rita Scallon, Chief Financial Officer, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. 8.11, School Donations, presented by Mrs. Rita Scallon, Chief Financial Officer, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval.
Dr. White, if I can.
Yes, sir.
As always, again, thank you to our community supporters and our business supporters for all the donations they give to the schools.
All right, very good.
Excuse me.
Board members, I'm going to ask that we go ahead and move down to construction program owners, representatives, business to 11.2. And I think that's the last remaining item on the agenda that would involve the Sheriff's Department. So in case you have any questions, and thereby we can let those good folks leave if they so choose, okay? So moving down to 11.2, Section 11, Construction Program Owners, Representatives, Business. 11.2, Program Number 6, Task Order Number 2, GMP, District-Wide School Security Upgrade Project, Phase 1, to include scope modification previously approved, presented by Dr. Bill Smith, Specialist, Facilities Planning Maintenance, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. Mr. Destin, you serve in that capacity for us, and you might have some comments about this. And Mr. Chambers, I know you have staff here, so if you'd like to proceed with that, Mr. Destin, is there anything you would add here?
This is the money that we're dedicating toward the school security upgrades. And as most of you all know, we really can't talk about what those particular upgrades are in a meeting. Dr. Smith can brief anybody that needs to be briefed, but we're going to be taking our steps toward upgrading the security on a number of schools, and we've got a number there which is fairly substantial, and that's part of the program. So we'll be moving forward. Superintendent, if you have anything to add to that?
I do, and so first of all, I think this is a good first step in getting the process going to do everything that we can for our schools. I know many of you would love if we could do every school this summer, but we know that that's not possible. But I have talked with Mr. Horton, I've talked with Ms. Scallon, and I've asked them to look at how can we extend to get to even more schools this summer. I know that Mr. Destin, you've mentioned that as well. I know that our school board would like to get to as many schools as we can. So I did ask that they look at and find additional dollars so we can go further than the schools that are on this list as far as we feasibly can go with the work that Jacobs Titan could do and with the amount of money that we have.
And I just say that while we're not necessarily going to talk about these changes, that I think the record will show that they will be evident, that folks will see them as they're implemented and as they're completed. Okay, some of them. They won't see all of them. Anything else?
And they are based on recommendations from a security committee that's made up of the Sheriff's Department and various staff members and our Mr. Dean. So we're doing as much as we can, as fast as we can.
Right. Mr. Bryant?
So pending Monday night's or Tuesday night's approval of this, then we should start seeing something pretty much right away then on the priority ones.
I think yes,
Okay.
that'll be the goal.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
All right, anything else, colleagues? Sheriff, we don't have anything else for you, I don't think, but I think I understand you'll be back Tuesday night, too.
I'll be happy to.
All right. Well, thank you. You're invited.
Honored to be with you.
Thank you, Sheriff. Thank you. All right, colleagues, so I think we left off at 8.11. Check me on that. So,
Yes.
okay, good. So we're now going to move to 8.12. Renewal of check recovery agreement between the School Board of Okaloosa County and Safe Check Incorporated for NSF Check Recovery Services, presented by Mrs. Rita Scallon, Chief Financial Officer, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. 8.13, ESE additional staffing for fiscal year 2019-2020, Florida Department of Education, on-site monitoring recommendations.
Chairman, if we can just ask a few questions. Ms.
Sure.
Ms. Scanlon, if you would come forward. We've got a pretty extensive list of reductions, and then down at the bottom on this, we have proposed additions to the ESE. I think there's a general description of the documents we've reviewed. And the only thing that concerns me is there are a couple of reductions that, and I've gotten quite a few emails and calls about, particularly the STP program, I think it's called, and the amount of money we're saving by reducing that. And I understand it's not a complete elimination, that we're going to give the option to some of the principals to do it, to have those folks in place a certain number of days a week. But go over for me what money we're saving by eliminating that program or reducing that program.
Okay, there were 28 STP aides, and so we've eliminated that program, and we're actually, in lieu of that program, we gave each school an aide and actually added 6 more aides. So it was 28 reduction and it was 34 add back. But what that did was that gave them the flexibility to use that position how they needed to use it versus there was, it's my understanding that on the STP that the incident rate was looked at, and there were schools that were utilizing those aides differently from what the intended purpose was anyway. So this gave them the flexibility to do that, which they should not have been doing that.
And how much money? did you say?
Originally it was $112,000, but with the addition back of those 6 aides, it wound up about a cost of about $24,000 more.
So we're actually spending more money.
But we're giving the 6 additional aides to schools that did not have it.
Okay. Thanks.
Okay, so I have concern about, with the superintendent. Because I think what I understand is that aide would be allowed 3 days to be an STP monitor. Is that correct?
No, ma'am.
Okay, can you correct me on how that aide could be used in
I can.
STP?
And I would like to say, just like, because of course we spoke individually about this topic a number of times. So right now, going down to the parapro type position, it does give the schools some flexibility.
Well, can we talk about that just for a second? And we may need our HR expert here. Is there a specific job description for STP monitors? I mean,
Yes.
okay. And so that specific job description dictates what they can and can't do. And I think what I'm hearing you say, that by moving into a para-pro job description, that would provide more flexibility. Is that right?
Correct.
And thereby principals, along with their input constituencies, whether it be a school advisory council or a faculty or whatever it might be, would be able to deploy those individuals in the fashion that most well suited their school, rather than be dictated that it has to be an STP every day, all the time. Is that correct?
That's correct.
All right, thank you.
But are they locked into only allowing them 3 days as STP?
I think you already answered.
So we've talked to our
For
principals.
clarification, please.
So we've talked to our principals about that. What we would not want to do is go to a different job description and then have them do the same work, because that obviously would not be right. So we talked to them about if they were to use them in that capacity, that they would use them in that capacity for a maximum of 2 days, where they would have other responsibilities as well as a parapro. We've talked to the schools also about how else would they utilize STP or an in-school suspension type program, just like we've did prior to having STP. Mrs. Lightbourne will be meeting with principals as we go through different topics such as discipline. So she'll be talking to them specifically about what are the different types of measures that schools can use, not being dictated at the district level, but putting our heads together with the principals, which will be a good brainstorming session, so to speak, on how we're going to look at STP as we go forward into the future.
Okay, is it true that the pay scale for an STP monitor is different from just a regular parapro?
Correct?
So those employees who were STP monitors are losing salary?
Correct, just like we discussed.
But you're still saying you're allowing a principal to decide how that position would be used?
Correct.
Only in the sense that up to 2 days a week, they could be STP?
Correct.
So if they're working STP for a couple days, do they get that salary for those 2 days? And then the other days, they get just a regular one?
So that's something that we're discussing right now internally.
Because that seems a little complex. Instead of just having a position to try and, okay, today you're this, tomorrow you're not. And I can't see how that is a benefit.
Well, I would say about the benefit part, the flexibility of a school to deploy those resources that best meet the needs of that student, those students,
Right.
that faculty, and that staff. Just from my personal background, I would say that is a tremendous asset and would be welcomed, at least in my case, speaking for myself, by this former principal.
I don't have a problem with the principal being allowed to use the employee the way that they think is best for their school. But I think when you're saying only 2 days you can be here and then and there's a difference in pay, I think that's complex. So how do you name 2 days to be an STP monitor? So today we have children who need that service, and so let's say you are in there 2 days, Monday and Tuesday, you can no longer have anybody monitor STP?
So to go, and of course, we're going deep into this right now, and like I said, and it's good to have this type of a discussion. And I do want to say as well, because of course, just reiterating, we've had these discussions already. But for example, so if there's an STP person, could be Mondays and Wednesdays. There could be individual in the front office who also could be responsible for watching kids as well. So schools, once again, with their employees having the ability to say, how are we going to handle STP if we continue to call it STP? Schools having the ability to solve that issue. But like I shared, Ms. Lightbourne is going to be meeting with our school principals and talking through this issue.
Okay. It just seems that, I like the flexibility, but I just don't know that the cost saving is worth changing up the program. That's just my opinion, so we can move on.
There is no cost
There is
savings.
no cost saving, it's going to cost more, and the issue
Oh,
I
yeah,
have
that's
with
right.
it is, we're being asked to approve a change that's not been, sounds like, fully fleshed out at all. And so what am I approving?
I understand the point,
Yeah.
and I would just say this, that my experience was, because, and again, this is individual, and I'm not sure this meets the experience of my colleague or even those folks that are currently serving as principals, but my experience is that when you decentralize and you allow schools to make the decisions that are best for their students in their school, that yes, there are going to be questions about how schools do it. In the past, this school board has permitted that to occur. And I think, in my opinion, it worked very, very well, even though there may have been some differences in how those resources were deployed at schools. I would just say that, and as far as pay and that kind of thing, in my opinion, that's a relatively simple matter that would be worked out by the principal and finance directing what days that individual performed those services. But that's just my opinion. Ms. Gowan?
And I just wanted to make sure, for clarification purposes, that the STP is not part of this agenda item, that it'll be brought to you as part of the budget, but it's...
You mean we can have all of these discussions again?
Yeah, and I mean, you can have the discussion. I just want to make sure that everybody was clear that that wasn't any part of this administrative and ESE piece.
Wish I had known earlier. Anything else on that particular item, Mr. Dustin? I know you...
I would acknowledge your experience and the need to let the schools do things on an individual basis. However, if we truly were going to do that, we would give the principals the option to have the parapro or the STP and let them make their own choice, which is not what this does.
Yeah, that's what I agree. I think it should be one or the other. I think that some days you're this and some days you're not I find it, just for me, complex, and having been in the school, knowing that you can't name 2 days that STP is when students need that service. And I've talked to many principals on this topic, and I know that some of them are like, I don't need the STP, but others, adamantly say it is a major service at our school. So going back to allowing those principals to use their resources, I don't understand why we can't just allow them to either have an STP monitor or have just an aide for another service. That's my consideration.
I understand, and I hear what you're saying, and I'm not necessarily disagreeing, except the one difference is that, as I remember, the site-based management plan was that the school paid for these positions. And in this case, I don't believe that is the case. So that's, so if the district has some guidelines or procedures, since the district is providing those dollars for this, then maybe that might be acceptable. I don't know. You'll have to vote your constituency or vote your conscience if this item stays on the agenda at a later time, I guess is what we've said.
But it seems like it would be a cost saving, because we're right now showing it's costing us more to go with this plan.
But we've added some, so I'm not sure that it would be a savings regardless.
Okay.
All right, well, we kind of got off the agenda, I guess, a little bit. This is not, we're not really voting on that one.
That's
huh?
why we're the people's board.
Yeah. All right,
Things
so
that
let's
come
go
up.
ahead then and move on then, unless there are any other questions to 8.14. Before and after school childcare, I think I've already read this one.
No, you haven't.
I did not?
That's where we're at.
We're on that now.
8.14, before and after school childcare, financial policies and procedures and fiscal year 2018-2019 childcare fees, presented by Mrs. Rita Scallon, Chief Financial Officer, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval.
Dr. White?
Yes, sir.
I don't have a comment necessarily about the procedures and policies. I appreciate the sit-down that I had with Ms. Scallon regarding that. But for just informational purposes, we have several schools that offer daycare, and this is one of the few entities that that are actually out there to help the schools make money, additional money, and they fund different programs within the schools. But I thought y'all might be interested in kind of seeing each school where they stand, and thank Ms. Gallen for putting this together. And if you have any questions regarding that after the meeting, I'm sure she will kind of answer it for you. But
So what is this, Mr. Bryant?
this is,
Did you hand it out?
this is their revenue versus expenditures.
Okay.
It's kind of like a profit and loss.
Like a net?
Yeah.
Okay.
Not necessarily, showing a profit or a loss. It just talks about their expenses.
Well, the good news is I'm not seeing any parenthetical columns. So we're not in the red.
Well, that's why I would say go to Ms. Gallen, because sometimes what's in parentheses might not necessarily be a good thing, but.
All right, Ms. Gallen.
Well, and let me just go ahead and mention for y'all, if you look, Mr. Bryan had asked me to provide him the last, I think, 3 years, but I did 4 years anyway, their revenue and their expenses. And so if you look at 17-18 by school, and let's just take Blue Water. All right, the bottom line, if you look at revenue over under expenditures, it looks like they've spent more than they took in, and they did for that year. However, they have a rolling balance. So just because you see a negative doesn't mean that they're running in the red. They're all in the black. But
Right.
like Mr. Bryant said, sometimes they saved some of their money to do other things by teaching positions, renovate, build buildings, those kinds of things. So that's why you may see, some negatives. And then there may be some that are just normal expenditures or beyond what they're currently taking in. But that's why you have to kind of look at each one on a case-by-case basis.
Okay. Anything else?
And like I said, I just thought y'all would be interested. I know I was very interested in it, so,
Thank you.
since the majority of them are up in my zone, so.
The more profitable ones certainly are.
What's that?
So, the profitable ones, a lot of them are there. That's very nice.
Okay, so unless there are any other points here, we'll move on then to 8.15, ITB 19-07, painting bid district-wide, presented by Mr. Vince Wyndham, Program Director Purchasing, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. 8.16, exempted purchase over $25,000, Scholastic Education, presented by Mr. Vince Wyndham, Program Director Purchasing, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. 8.17, tag on bid 19-0036, basketball tennis play courts resurfacing with line striping and repairs, presented by Mr. Vince Wyndham, Program Director, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. 8.18, tag on bid over $25,000, Mohawk Resources LTD, presented by Mr. Vince Wyndham, Program Director Purchasing, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. 8.19, service agreement number 20-01, Jamie Fields, presented by Mr. Vince Wyndham, Program Director Purchasing, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. 8.20, service agreement number 20-02, Abigail Reynolds, presented by Mr. Vince Wyndham, Program Director Purchasing, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. 8.21, service agreement number 20-06, Emerald Coast Science Center BioBlitz Program, presented by Mr. Vince Wyndham, Program Director Purchasing, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. And colleagues, you know these items are all sort of related here. 8.22, service agreement for number 20-07, Emerald Coast Science Center Guided Dissection, presented by Mr. Vince Wyndham, Program Director Purchasing, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. 8.23, service agreement number 20-08, Emerald Coast Science Center Family Science Night, presented by Mr. Vince Wyndham, Program Director Purchasing, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. 8.24, service agreement number 20-09, Emerald Coast Science Center Planetarium Program, presented by Mr. Vince Wyndham, Program Director Purchasing, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. 8.25, service agreement number 20-10, Emerald Coast Science Center SSA Enrichment Program, presented by Mr. Vince Wyndham, Program Director Purchasing, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval.
Dr. White?
Yes, sir.
Now that you went through all of those,
Pretty quickly, I think.
I would like to just say thank you, and I know Diane's not here right now, but Diane Frazier, who's with the Emerald Coast Science Center, and it's a great partnership that we have with that wonderful facility over there. And, you know, I encourage people, if you get a chance to go over there and check it out. She does a lot of great things with our students, so I'm glad to see these are on the agenda today to continue that partnership with the Emerald Coast Science Center.
She does some parent nights, too, that are pretty
Yes.
phenomenal.
Yes.
For us grown-ups.
Yes.
All right, very good. Thank you, colleagues. All right, so 8.26, amendment to the 401A FICA alternative plan presented by Mr. Russ Frakes, risk management specialist, and recommended by the superintendent for approval.
Dr. White,
Yes,
if we
sir.
could have, I see Russ is in the room, and anytime you have 401A, FICA, alternative plans, I think there's a chance to talk about what's going on with that.
Welcome, Mr. Frakes.
This is, yes, this, I appreciate it. This is just an amendment to an agreement that was previously approved. It was presented at the April 8th meeting and approved by the board. We are moving, of course, to remind you, we are moving from BenCor to Mid-America. And in the course of doing so and meeting with Mid-America, they offered some options to us, one of which was to be done by amendment. That's what this will involve. And again, the FICA alternative plan is for essentially substitute teachers would be the primary participants in that program, and then allow them to invest money through this vehicle. And this amendment simply provides them with more flexibility, gives them the option to receive distributions from those investments once they receive retirement age. In other words, they're still working, they're over age 65, they can take that money out and receive that as a benefit. So it just provides more flexibility is simply what the amendment is accomplishing.
I appreciate that. And, you know, when we look at our 401K, you have to realize there's a B, C, D, E, F.
That's right.
And so
That's
it's kind
right. You
of-
got
So
all-
when
you
you see
got all the alphabet
401A, that
represented
gives
there.
an opportunity to explain
Yes.
what that is. Thank
Absolutely.
you.
Very good.
All right, thank you, Mr. Frakes. All right, so 8.27, sale and disposal of surplus property, presented by Mr. Steve Bolton, Director of Facilities Planning and Maintenance, and recommended by the superintendent for approval. 8.28, the Okaloosa County School District 2020-2021 school calendar, presented by Ms. Dusha Ross, Program Director, Information Systems, and recommended by the superintendent for approval.
I just have one comment. I think
fine.
it's great that, again, we're forward thinking here, and, you know, we just did a 2-year, and now we're already into the 2021. So I think this is great for people who obviously plan well ahead. I know I'm not one of those. I'm usually a week-to-week guy. But for the parents and during all the holidays, I think this is great. Gives them plenty of opportunity to plan ahead.
Anything else? Good. Okay. All right, so then moving on to Section 9, Superintendent's Human Resources, and like we said before, 9.1 is an information item, Employees on Administrative Leave, presented by Dr. Lee Hale, Assistant Superintendent, Human Resources. 9.2, Deferred Retirement Option Program Drop, presented by Dr. Lee Hale, Assistant Superintendent, Human Resources. 9.3, Out of Field Report for 2018-2019 school year, presented by Ms. Karen Peak, Program Director of Professional Services, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. 9.4, request to advertise the public hearing for adoption of a new job description for ESE Parent Liaison, presented by Dr. Lee Hale, Assistant Superintendent of Human Resources, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval.
Dr. White, can I ask Mr. Chambers, and I apologize, I'm just coming to you for this
Okay,
today, but
that's
can
fine.
you kind of explain what the ESE Parent Liaison is what their function's going to be? I know you're putting an emphasis on ESE, so how's this going to benefit the school district?
Absolutely, and I'm just going to talk about it kind of simplistically. So as we go into the next school year, this would be a position that we would bring before you for the 2019-2020 school year. The goal of this position is to give parents another avenue of someone a person who could be straight, direct line between the parent and the school system. And then this parent liaison would have the ability to answer those ESE type questions, or even questions prior to a student becoming ESE, that can provide the direct answer, or be that line straight to the ESE department and get that answer for the parent. It's an attempt to be even more responsive to our ESE parents and families.
Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir.
All right, 9.5, request to advertise a public hearing for the adoption of a new job description for Program Director, Facilities Plant Planning, presented by Dr. Lee Hale, Assistant Superintendent, Human Resources, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval.
Chairman, if you may,
Yes, sir.
Mr. Hale, can you explain to us what this is?
I can do the best that I can, but I might have to defer to Mr. Horton, as this is kind of in his area. But this, in my understanding, is to align the guys that were the current administration that we have in there, in absence of an assistant superintendent that is no longer have a job being filled there, and is to more align their responsibilities and also the salaries. I believe it's a levelization.
I think Mr. Hort to give a little bit more clarification.
Yes, sir. Thank you, board members. So as you are aware of looking at some of the restructuring that's before you on a previous agenda item, the superintendent is recommending the removal of the assistant superintendent of operations position completely from the budget going forward. As you know, I'm assistant superintendent for MIS, and we'll take on those responsibilities in the upcoming year. So there's a removal of the top position in the operations area. As a result, in looking at the restructuring, we had a director of facilities and planning position and maintenance, and some of those duties have been reassigned. And so that the positions that are being requested are a director position and a specialist position being deleted from the budget, and it's related to this particular job description, so I want to make sure the board members have an understanding. But a director and a specialist position would both not appear in next year's budget and would be replaced with 2 program director positions. And the reason for that, from my perspective, from a management standpoint, is the responsibilities of those 2 positions right now are both at a level where I believe that program director is the position in the correct position. In addition, in those departments, we've got a retiring 12-month district level secretary position that's not being refilled, and a cabling position that deals mostly with projectors that has been empty, and so I've asked to remove that from the budget as well. So I'm looking at it kind of holistically on the operations side, the need to levelize those 2 positions from the standpoint of job responsibilities, and in terms of and reporting structure too, because there will no longer be that assistant superintendent of operations. So in doing so, there was not a program director for facilities planning job description within our plethora of job descriptions. So that's why that one has been written and offered up to the board to advertise.
And so, are we spending more money or less money?
Well, so when I look at it from the operations standpoint, by my math, it's about $250,000 less through all of this. And again, they're all interrelated, because if the assistant superintendent for operations position was still in the budget going forward, I don't know that there would be a need to do the restructuring that we're doing. So the answer to the question is about $250,000 in savings through this area. Specifically with the director and specialist position being repurposed as 2 program directors, I think there's a net of about $4,200 increase in that one area. So it depends on how you slice it in terms of whether you say it's an increase or reduction. I would say in that department it's about a $250,000 reduction.
All right, and I appreciate the question and the point. And so might we liken this to a reorganization then? I mean, is that a reorganization of this department, and the consequence of that reorganization results in the $250,000 savings?
That is how I would describe it. Yes, sir.
All right, so it's a reorganization.
I
Interesting.
understand,
Mr.
but
Dessner?
I think the bottom line was that we're going to spend $4,200 more.
Per position?
That's the part, we're saving money, but we're spending more, the 4,200.
Well, I mean,
You
in
mentioned-
the program director positions versus the director?
I think so.
Okay.
It's gotten very muddled. Another question I have is,
Well, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well, go ahead,
This is
Mr.
a-
Horton, if you have an
yeah, go
answer.
ahead if you have the answer to
Yeah.
that.
I just want to make sure I was explaining clearly, because you said that it was muddled, so I want to make sure that,
Okay.
I just want to make sure that board members are clear on what the reorganization plan is. So.
Are we spending more on the positions is what I'm asking. And
On
it appears
positions?
that you said we are. Overall, we're gonna
Overall-
save, but we're
overall-
spending more on the positions. Is that a good
I think that the overall reduction is $250,000 net of every change in positions. Yes, sir.
And since this is a different job description, do we advertise something like that, or?
We do, and that's what this is. This board, if the board takes action, would be to advertise this. And so it would then sit for the amount of time before it could get approved as a job description. And then obviously, if it's approved as a job description, there would be an advertisement for applicants for that position, and then we do an interview process for it.
And that would come back to the board?
It would come back to the board, yes, sir.
And I think with it going from a specialist to a program director, and you can correct me on this, but that job description has given them some more job responsibilities, am I correct?
Exponentially, yes, sir. So the position moving to a program director would take on all of the facilities planning piece, the growth
Right.
management piece for the entire district as well, which the current specialist position by job description does not contain.
And the difference between the specialist and the program director is about, what, $11,000 a year?
I think so.
And so this is part of the 1.1 million you say that you cut at the district level, correct? This would be
Correct. So
part
so
of a
I
piece
so I
of
do
that?
want to say something as well. So, and I get the comments, Mr. Dessen. But once again, overall, in the operations department, when we're talking about maintenance and facilities as an entity, there will be an overall savings as we go into next year. And of course, like we've talked about individually as well as we've gone through this right here, there'll be about a $1.1 million reduction at the district level. And this is absolutely part of realigning and restructuring and a different organizational structure to the district.
I think I'm done with that one at the moment.
Well, the key word there was at the moment, because
I think that was the key word.
Yeah, we'll be discussing this some more, I'm sure, on Monday night. But in any case, good job, Mr. Horton.
Thank you. Thank
All
you.
right. All right, so moving forward now to 9.6, instructional and educational support personnel recommendations for the 2019-2020 school year, presented by Dr. Lee Hale, Assistant Superintendent, Human Resources, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval.
I want to ask Dr. Hill, while we're talking about instructional, I want to ask you something about the upcoming Teach at the Beach. Could you give us a little information on that, starting like late next week?
Well, on June 1st
Yeah,
is
June
Teach
1st,
at the
yeah.
Beach, and that's a Saturday, all-day job fair for all of our schools who have positions to post. We currently have roughly about 120 people signed up for Teach at the Beach, and we have the opportunity to both speak to people who are seeking jobs, and each school will have a presentation set up there, and individual interviews will happen on site that day. Some may be able to actually hire on the spot. We currently have given the principals the ability to go ahead and post their positions, because we have currently no recommendations that have not yet found a home. There are no positioned instructional employees out there, so we're able to post all of our instructional positions beginning yesterday. So the transfer period has started, and so anything that remains after the transfer period, the principals will be able to bring to Teach at the Beach and actually have on-the-site interviews and find some candidates. I would like to give some special kudos to my department, Lindsay Maxey, Ashley Cody, Mandy Jeter, and the rest of them in there. They have done a phenomenal job reaching out. As you've heard, the educational field looks a little bit different than it has been over the last 10 years, but they have beat every bush, shake every tree, and done everything we can to find candidates, and we're excited about the prospects on June 1st.
So about how many openings do we probably have? I know you can't stay down because
Yeah,
some people don't resign till later on in
Right.
the summer and all that.
And
but-
so I really couldn't give you a number right now, but I can tell you that I was having a conversation with somebody, I can't remember exactly, out on the sidewalk this morning, and when they got the permission, the green light to go ahead and post jobs, there was a flurry of that, so I hear there may be up to 30 jobs
I actually
already
looked at it
posted.
this morning, and there was at least 30
30
on
or
there.
so.
And-
Yeah.
And
But
the
there's
day
more
before,
to
there was
come.
only just a few.
Right,
so-
there, yeah, I looked
yeah.
at it today and there wasn't.
And some of those positions are more difficult to fill than others.
There are some that are very hard to fill. and others that aren't. But we've been very successful in years past, and I would have an optimistic outlook with regard to the job fair and our hiring season that's coming up.
Did you check into the local universities? Is that what you're saying? So
We did. We've,
what's that looking like coming out of, say, University of West Florida, education, all
I
that?
actually sent, Lindsay Maxey is the one that's gone to their various career fairs and the things that they have there. And I can tell you that it seems like there's a reduction in candidates over years past. I can't be specific with percentages or numbers like that, but the first job fair we had several years ago had over 270 applicants, and so now we're looking at 120. So the local areas are seeing the same things that we're seeing, which is just a reduction in the workforce. So, but like I said, I think that we're going to have plenty of candidates to fill our jobs, plenty of people good candidates to vet and look through. With regard to specific universities, I'm not really sure about any data, but we have had conversations with West Florida. We've been to Troy, Florida State, Florida. We spoke this week with FAMU, and so we're really excited about the prospects of what they do have coming to us. Northwest Florida State as well.
Right. That's
And it's not really on the agenda, but I'll follow up with your point and your question. And we're in competition though for these positions, right?
There's no doubt about it. Everybody in the surrounding area is looking for the hot candidates. There's no doubt about it.
And that makes it a little more interesting. doesn't it?
Absolutely.
And on that note, I do too want to say very much appreciate the work of HR to get those jobs posted so the transfer period could go out. That way that we are ready for the Teach at the Beach. And as you know, there's a lot of time and effort that goes into that. So I think that's a great job.
So is the Teach at the Beach, did you advertise, not the positions, but the event out pretty far, or how did that happen?
We've used our social media and our website, and there's been a lot of interest expressed to us specifically. We're working on a newspaper ad to go out this week, and so we've been working back and forth with the newspaper to get some of not only in their print media but also those little things that they have that flash on their online portals and things like that. And I can tell you that Miss Maxey was doing a real good job of going back and forth to find us a really manageable price, and so we're excited about that as well. That'll be kind of the last push leading up to it.
And Teach at the Beach will be held at Choctaw High School this year,
Choctawhatchee
right?
High School, June
Okay,
1st.
great.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Dr. Hale.
All right.
Appreciate that information.
Yeah.
All right, thank you, Dr. Hill. All right, so let's move on now to 9.7, Personnel Recommendations, presented by Dr. Lee Hale, Assistant Superintendent, Human Resources, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval.
Just want to say that we were talking about instructional, but we're always looking for good employees in the non-instructional part too. We need those employees in all areas, so I'm sure they're working in that area as well to get, and we want the best here in Okaloosa.
All right, so 9.8, Employment Separations, presented by Dr. Lee Hale, Assistant Superintendent, Human Resources, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. 9.9, Employee Transfers, presented by Dr. Lee Hale, Assistant Superintendent, Human Resources, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. 9.10, Employee Suspension, presented by Dr. Lee Hale, Assistant Superintendent, Human Resources, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. 9.11, Employee Suspension, presented by Dr. Lee Hale, Assistant Superintendent, Human Resources, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. 9.12, Employee Suspension, presented by Dr. Lee Hale, Assistant Superintendent, Human Resources, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. 9.13, Employee Suspension, presented by Dr. Lee Hale, Assistant Superintendent, Human Resources, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. 9.14, Employee Suspension, presented by Dr. Lee Hale, Assistant Superintendent, Human Resources, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. 9.15, Reinstatement Reimbursement of Sick Leave due to Line of Duty Illness, Injury, Medical Examination, presented by Dr. Lee Hale, Assistant Superintendent, Human Resources, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. And then 9.16, Leave Without Pay, presented by Dr. Lee Hale, Assistant Superintendent, Human Resources, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. Section 10, Discussion Agenda. At this time, we have no items moved, though they may appear. Section 11, Construction Program Owners Representatives Business. 11.1, Program Status Report by the Board's representative. Mr. Destin, I know you already spoke a little bit. You may have something else?
I think that's going to cover it at the moment.
Well, again, I certainly appreciate the role you're playing there, and I know that you guys have been meeting an awful lot, so
Thanks.
thank you. 11.2, Program Number 6, Task Order Number 2, GMP, District-Wide School Security Upgrade Project Phase 1 to include scope modification previously approved. And folks, we've already covered this item, so I'm just going to quickly move on. All right, Section 12, Information Technology Seat Management Contract, 12.1, CACI Task Order Number 2-132, Blue Water Elementary School, CCTV, presented by Mr. Dustin Keith, Specialist Seat Management, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. Moving on, Mr. Attorney, your business, sir.
Just one update for the board. You may remember that in the fall, the board had asked me to seek an opinion from the Attorney General's office
Yeah.
regarding some issues on the Best and Brightest program. I wanted to let you know that I have recently received a letter from that office informing me that because of the significant changes the Florida legislature made to the program this year, that they are declining our request for an opinion as it now appears to be moot. So that was the final result of that request.
Well, so, there you go. Well, I get that part, that they're not going to give an opinion, but I guess that begs the question, so does the law fully address our questions?
Well, we have to look, according to them, we would need to look at this
New
recently
statute.
adopted legislation
All right.
and see what changes they've made.
Okay, so Mr. Chambers, you'll have your staff taking a look at that in consultation with the lawyer so that we can figure out exactly, since no one else would wade into the murky waters with us.
Yes, sir.
I would suppose the audit findings that dinged a couple of other districts would be moot also at this point, since there have been substantial changes, right?
Good point. Maybe they get their money back.
I would-
Well,
That's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
well, we tried. We can't say we didn't ask for it. All right, Superintendent, sir, correspondence. I know you've got some field trips, but is there anything else you'd like to talk about today?
Yeah, it's just a few things. So first of all, as you know, graduations are forthcoming tonight. Sure, I see a lot of you all at the Silver Sands graduation, and then of course as we go forward into next week, there'll be more and more. So this is just a special time. A lot of senior walks are going on. So I've heard a lot of great reports about senior walks, and then of course, as you know, a lot of awards going on as well throughout the school district. And I did want to address one piece. As you know, over the course of the last couple months, we have had some administrative positions where we've had to fill some, whether it be a principal, whether it be an assistant principal. And when we had those administrative positions, of course, those were vacant positions that we then filled. And I wanted to get back with you, Ms. Ivanchek. I believe it was the special workshop. I think that you had made the comment in terms of adding additional administrative positions. And so that's something that I kind of took to heart. So I just wanted to go back and kind of look at that data. So we have added one administrative position, and that was the HR specialist. That was the investigator, and that was the position that we all spoke about. That would be for the remainder of this year and then all of next year, and then determining do we still need that position. The gentleman who took that position, he's fully aware of that, shared that with him. Again, I think Dr. Hale shared it with them. I shared it with them to make certain that we were all in the same position. But in terms of adding administrative positions, plural, we have not, but we have added that one with board approval.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. That's all I have.
Okay. Okay, so moving on then to Section 11, Board Members' Announcements and Requests for Information. And Mr. Destin, I always start with you, so I'll try to rotate, be a little fair. One of the best classes I ever had in school was the logic class, and I hated it. Because that professor, what he would do is he would call on you at random. You never knew. You guys are always prepared, so if we did it that way here, that would be fine. But today, I'll start with Ms. Ivanchek. Ms. Ivanchek?
Thank you. Just want to mention, of course, it is Memorial Day weekend, and that's particularly important in our area when we have so many veterans and those individuals who have served and are serving our country. And of course, Memorial Day recognizes those who pay the ultimate price. So while it's nice to have a 3-day weekend, schools will not be in session on Monday. We certainly want to remember the meaning of this long weekend. And also to tell those students we're not quite out yet and to be safe this weekend. This is the targeted place to come for, and I think Memorial Day officially kicks off the summer season. And so we have a lot of tourists in town and people out having a good time, but it also going to make sure that they're safe and so they can come back and finish out those 4 days next week. So wishing everybody a happy Memorial Day weekend.
Thank you, Ms. Venture. Dr. Kelly?
Well, and I would echo some of those same sentiments. What a wonderful time of year to get to go to the celebrations and the honors awards and congratulate students and their families and their teachers who have promoted them and supported them throughout the year. So this is a wonderful time of year. And also heard Ashley Bailey say just yesterday that over spring break there were over 600 arrests, but almost all of them were from out of town. They were not Okaloosa students who were arrested and in trouble, so I would suspect maybe the same hopefully will hold for Memorial Day. But then also to say that word of caution to students who might have that temptation to make one errant decision that costs them something valuable, their reputation or harm to themselves or others on these celebratory events. So just to keep that in mind, a word of caution to students as I love them so dearly. So I would say those things in my own classes every year, in my own student bodies every year. So that's it.
Thank you, Dr. Kelly. Mr. Bryan?
And I will agree with what both of my colleagues said there about Memorial Day and about students and everybody being responsible this upcoming weekend. But I also would like to emphasize on the awards part of everything. You know, what's interesting is how much money is given to these students at each of the awards that we go to. So I've always been curious to know how much exactly goes between the 6 schools and what those students get. And that's for another day, but it has to be close to over $1 million, I'm sure. Just more than that, but it's incredible. But I also would like to follow up on something Ms. Ivanchek was talking about, employees and where we need help. But in my travels the other day, and Mr. Bolt and I talked to, well, we chatted a little bit the other day, and I came across an employee who's a support person in maintenance, and a very humble, very modest person. Of course, y'all know I like to take pictures of everybody and throw them on social media just to brag about them. But this particular gentleman is Jeff Christie, and he told me, when I asked him what his job description was, he told me he was just a plumber. And I say that he is not just a plumber, he is a very valued employee of our school district. And without people like Mr. Christie who are behind the scenes, I can assure you we would not just need just a plumber, but we need somebody with his expertise and his passion for our schools and our facilities. So I just want to recognize all of our support people behind the scenes, whether they're in maintenance or whether they're administrative assistants, whatever their job, excuse me, whatever their job duty is, they're not just a plumber. They are a valued employee of the school district. So, Mr. Christie, thank you for all that you do. Mr. Bolton, thank you for sharing that with me also.
Very good, Mr. Bryan. Mr. Destin?
Very good. And I'm just going to echo the sentiments about this last week where the students who have worked all 12 years are getting the rewards of their just labors. And looking at this group every year, I think that it can't get better, but it appears that it does. You know, every year I'm amazed at the quality and the accomplishment that these students achieve. So I want to congratulate all of them.
Very good. Yes, sir. All right, so let's move on quickly now. We'll finish up public comment. We'll have that 16.1. Now, we do have 3 public hearings, along with some other items that we'll be doing Monday night. So 17.1, public hearing for the adoption of a new job description for Director, Exceptional Student Education and Student Services, presented by Dr. Lee Hale, Assistant Superintendent, Human Resources, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. 17.2, public hearing for adoption of a revised job description for Assistant Principal 1, presented by Dr. Lee Hale, Assistant Superintendent, Human Resources, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. 17.3, public hearing for the adoption of a revised School Board Policy 07-03, employment conditions for educational support personnel, presented by Dr. Lee Hale, Assistant Superintendent, Human Resources, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. And then that finally gets us to the item at the very end, and that's adjournment. All right, is there anything else, colleagues or superintendent, that we need to talk about? How about staff, anything? Mr. Horton, yes, sir, would you come forward?
Thanks, Dr. White. Just with the discussions of graduation coming up, I want to remind folks who might be tuning in that the district does live stream all graduations. And so for those service members that may be overseas, they can get to our website, ocalosaschools.com, and view those high school graduations live streamed.
Awesome.
This.
Thank you, Mr. Horton. All right, I'm not seeing anything else. All right, so this workshop is adjourned.